Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest is a world-class leader and operator. He's been a driving force behind a number of the most successful technology companies in the world. He's seen and been a part of companies that are at every stage of the business life cycle, from very early stage private companies to public companies with over $1 billion in revenue. His career in tech started in product management and marketing. He was a marketing leader at Palo Alto Networks and then went on to become CMO of Nutanix, Zscaler, and Redis Labs. I met him when he joined BetterCloud as an advisor. Honestly, he's probably one of the best marketers I know, but he added value in so many other ways. That's why I wasn't surprised when he left the CMO ranks to become a CEO. He's now CEO of one of the hottest cybersecurity companies that helps organizations detect and stop critical insider risks to their most important data. Please welcome CEO at Cyberhaven, Howard Ting.
David, thank you for having me. That was the kindest and most gracious intro anyone's ever done. So I need to hire you as my agent.
Well, it's really good to have you. We've had a lot of conversations on the side, but I'm excited to do this so that other people can learn from your journey. So let's just get right into it. First question: what's the one thing you've done, big or small, at Cyberhaven that's had the biggest impact, and you'll absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
Yeah, I'll give you two answers. The first one is a higher impact answer, which is I think about the product and the market every day. And I did that from day one here, and I do it today. And every day I'm thinking about how the market is evolving, just synthesizing all the data points that are coming at me from our field, from customers, from competitors, and really just trying to digest all that to think about how is the market moving and what should we do about the shifts that are coming at us. And so I'm constantly thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead, and I've done that for every day since I've been in this chair. So that's probably one of the bigger things I would say. A
Let me
smaller,
ask you a question on that one, then we'll get to the smaller one. On that one, when you talk about all these inputs, um, is this firsthand kind of inputs that you're going and getting, secondhand, like you said, from the field, third hand from reports, industry report, or literally all of that?
it's all of it. It's all of it. I read a lot. Obviously, I talk with a lot of people. It's everything. It's direct from the market, and it's indirect through other intermediaries. I think a lot of times when you're getting it indirect, you have to kind of understand what frame of reference the input is coming with. So, for example, if I'm talking with my investor, I'm getting some, you know, maybe some bias in that. If I'm talking with my field, there's a different bias in the input that they're giving me. So I always try to understand what the bias is that the input maybe or the data points might be coming with. And I just synthesize all that. And I kind of just do that inherently. Like it's not something that I have to actively do. It's just like in the background, I'm constantly noodling on everything that I'm hearing and learning that day or the day before and trying to think about, is our current strategy the right one given everything that I'm learning. That's the big
And
one.
I feel like in this market, I mean, in your market specifically, cyber, it feels like there's so much happening all the time that I'd say cyber and just I would say technology companies in general at this point, like the speed of change is so fast that you need to have that information. I wonder when you get that information, how do you talk to your team about that or your investors about that? Is that also some loop that you have with everyone to bring that all hands meetings, or did you wait till the board meeting, talk to your investors? Like how do you handle that?
A lot of it depends on what it is. There are times when I'll just write down stuff in Slack or an email and send it out to the right group of folks. And there are other times when I'll just park it and just leave it kind of simmering inside my head for a period of time and then reflect back on it. So it really depends on what the context is. But I'm constantly trying to communicate back what my thinking is on a particular topic and what I'm hearing. I think that's so critical, sharing that information, sharing that knowledge and that perspective with the rest of your team and helping them understand how you're thinking about the opportunities ahead.
Great.
And, and,
Let's
and,
move to the other one if you
and
want
that's a good
to.
segue. That's a good segue about how to communicate back. So probably a smaller thing that I started doing early in my time at Cyberhaven, I still do today is I record a simple 5-minute video, very informal, not highly produced. I call it Friday Five, so I send it out Friday mornings typically. And I was doing this every Friday in the first few years of my time here, and I felt like it was such a great way for me to stay close with the team. We're very distributed. We're all across the world. We're a hybrid first environment, so we give a lot of flexibility to our team and how they work. And of course, with having people all over the world, it's really important to stay connected to them and for them to hear from me directly what I'm thinking. So it's just a stream of consciousness. I don't do a high production thing where I have recording and editing like you have here. So I usually probably look pretty raggedy in these videos, like maybe I just woke up, my hair's a little
Especially end of the
messed up.
week, end of the week.
Yeah, it's the end of the week look, like you got the, you know, maybe I haven't shaven well that day, or, my hair is a little messed up, or my hair. So I don't look good in these videos, but the content, the message is important for the team to hear what's on my mind. What have I seen? What have I observed? What's ahead of us? Um, so I was doing that myself every Friday for a long time. And then as my exec team is built out, I've given them the platform now. So we rotate in now the exec team. So we have a schedule now where, execs are assigned certain dates and topics that they're going to speak to. So we're continuing to do that every Friday here. And it's a great way to keep the company well informed and also highly engaged.
I love that. I love that. I actually think, I at Better Cloud, one of the people on the team, they said to me, Dave, you write these long emails, these company updates that are like 3 pages long. And they said, I'm sorry, I don't know if anyone reads them. It's so long. It would take me like a whole weekend to write one email. And they said, I wish you would just send a video because it would just be easier to consume if you did like a short form video. And I did it one time, people loved it, and I never did it again. I don't really know why I never did it again. I Something about the email form, like it let me take the time to write it, make sure I'm saying what I want to say. But actually, I think in today's world, people consume probably video in that form better than a 3 page email.
There's a time and a place for that. I write the 3-page email at the beginning of every year to kind of set the agenda for the year, talk about the year ahead, reflect back on the previous year and all the accomplishments. So I do a very long written piece at the beginning of the year. But I think these weekly updates, I think the employees love the authenticity of it, the just like the rawness of it, so that when you write a long email like that, it's like, it's something that you edited and, gone back and changed. So it's a highly produced piece. Some employees may see that as a bit of a propaganda piece almost, it's like you want them to feel or believe a certain thing. When you're just kind of like recording a video stream of consciousness and it's not highly produced, they know that that's just the raw uh, thoughts. Those are the raw thoughts on your mind. And I think there's a time and a place for both.
Mhm. And so now you were doing it every week. Now you have execs. How often do you do it still?
So lately, I haven't been doing them as often, but I have a lot of material that I'm ready to send out. So lately, I've been just like sending a lot of updates on Slack because we have a lot of new execs, and I'm trying to give them all opportunities to talk
Mhm.
about their function, their backgrounds. We also do an AMA with all the new exec Ask Me Anything session. So anytime a new exec comes in, we typically do an AMA session with them so that the company can learn about these execs, their backgrounds, what they're here to do, what they have observed so far in the functions that they're inheriting. So we're doing that as well to try to introduce these folks to the company. But
Mm.
these Friday Fives are also a good way
Love it.
to introduce them.
Love it. Love it. And it's simple. These are like the tricks that I love because they're simple, but can be so powerful with that. So thank you for that. That's the first time anyone's given me that. So that's a new tip and a new lesson learned for everyone. So thank you. So Howard, when you joined Cyberhaven, it was early on. Company was still pretty early in terms of size, revenue, all of that. And now, based on what I know and seen and heard from you, the company is probably one of the fastest growing cyber companies out there. How did you what did you change to ignite that growth?
Yeah, there was a lot of good raw material here when I joined. So the company had been running for, I think, about 4 years. So the company was founded in 2016 by four PhDs out of a Swiss university named EPFL. And they had built some amazing technology. And when I was referencing with VCs and other folks that had met this team, they all said that. They all said, this is an incredible team, very, very talented technically, amazing technology under the hood. I heard that from a number of the VCs. And I knew that the company was lacking focus on a specific problem, lacking go-to-market expertise and how to position the product, how to identify the right ICP, how to go after certain budgets. And so that's really the complementary nature of my background and experience with the founding team. And I think it was really a match made in heaven, just given my background. Um, I I hate to say this way because it may seem critical of the found team, but I changed everything. I changed, I changed the product strategy and positioning. I changed how we were messaging and telling our story. I changed the culture and the operating rhythm of the team. I changed a lot of the team as well. So there was a lot of change. When I joined the company, we were a handful of customers, probably like sub 200K of ARR or something like that. In the time that I've been here for 4+ years now, we've grown that ARR like 120x, and we're continuing to grow very, very rapidly. So a lot has changed in the time here, but the first couple of years was laying the foundation for a lot of the success that we're having now, and that really started with the product strategy and the positioning and the go-to-market strategy.
So one of the things, I have never been part of a company where I wasn't there from the beginning. And so I'm always interested when I talk to people like you've come in as CEO, been really successful in doing all the things you mentioned. How long did it take you to really get your head around the product and the company and the culture and the market? Like, is that something you did in a matter of weeks, months, quarters, years? Like, because that to me feels like one of the challenges. You walk into an existing company, you have the product, you have that they've already gone after some market, they have some customers, even if it's few of them, they have a team, and you have to get up to speed on all of that
Yeah.
and start making decisions. Like, how long was that process for you?
It was fast for me because I grew up in cybersecurity. I started my career in 2000 at a company named RSA Security, one of the pioneers of the cyber market. And I spent 5 years there. And I went on and did a bunch of other companies in identity and security at Microsoft and some startups, was acquired into Cisco at one point. So I've seen the market and the evolution of the market from pretty early days. I've been in and around this market for 20+ years by the time I joined Cyberhaven. And so I had a lot of background on the problem set that we were attacking. I had a lot of background on the vendor landscape. I knew a lot of customers that I could personally reach out to and get feedback. I knew a lot of the folks that worked in the vendor community. So I started formulating my thoughts on this market and opportunity, obviously, when I was evaluating, when I was considering it. And obviously, you don't know everything when you're on the outside and you're coming in. So there are going to be some surprises. But I would say my assimilation, my ability to understand the business pretty quickly was one of the keys to my success here.
Yeah, that I think that for me, that feels like when you look at the CEOs who come into these types of companies where they're not the founder, the speed at which they can do what you just said is what matters. Because if you come into a company like that and spend a year trying to figure out what to do and have an opinion, and the investors don't have that energy to wait for that, the team starts to get so to be able to do that quickly, it makes a lot of sense. Can we talk as we talk about that? Can we talk about something I'm very passionate about, which is the ideal customer profile, choosing an ideal customer profile, going after that? How did you what was it when you got there, or how much did you change it? I'm curious your thoughts on this topic, because this is something when you were helping us at Better Cloud, we spent a lot of time talking about, and I'm curious how you put that into practice at Cyberhaven.
Yeah, I would say when I joined, there was no ideal customer profile. We had a smattering of customers, those 4 or 5 customers I talked about. There was no commonality to them, zero. And uh, I think I approached it in a couple different ways. I knew from my background at startups like Palo Alto and Nutanix that starting mid market and working your way up into larger enterprises is a better way to attack a market, especially if you have a very disruptive product and they're strong incumbents with strong account control in the larger enterprises. You want folks that are willing to make change, willing to take risks, and willing to embrace a young vendor with a differentiated technology. And the larger companies, I think, are going to be a little more risk averse, and they're going to wait to see the market settle. They're going to wait for validation from analysts like Gartner, et cetera. So you typically have to, you may want to engage some of them just to understand their needs and their concerns about the category, but you really don't want to target them as customers because those sales cycles are probably going to be very long and maybe not successfully closed. So we targeted mid-market customers initially. And given the nature of the product and the problems that we solve, we also targeted very tech-centric, tech-forward and IP-centric companies, companies that have a lot of intellectual property where they have users handling this data. And it's a requirement for the users to handle it. So like in software companies, developers, they have to handle a lot of data, right? And in manufacturing firms, you have these users, that have design files and things like they have to handle this data or else the companies cease to exist or operate effectively. So we targeted companies that were in mid-market that had a lot of intellectual property and users had to handle a lot of data. And then the third dimension that we layered on was industries where there was constant turnover of the employee base, people coming and going. And so you see that a lot with tech companies, startups. You see a lot of people coming and going. You see that a lot with law firms, consulting firms, right? Like there's kind of like this rhythm of employee base that comes and goes as because they hire a lot from undergrad, and then a lot of people graduate out of those roles into other industries and other roles. And so we target those kinds of organizations. And one thing I can tell you about our ICP journey is that we didn't stick as religiously to them as we should have. I'm sure for all the listeners out there, there's this like attraction, like this to go and engage with the JP Morgan Chase or, the Tesla or, one of the Mag 7 companies. How can you avoid that, right? Like if they have taken interest in your company and your product, you're going to engage. But I think it's so critical that you stay disciplined on this because the more that you engage and the more that you start thinking about how to serve their needs, the less focused you are on your real ICP. And so I think that's one of the things that I wish I did better here at Cyberhaven. We took those meetings. We started thinking about how we should adapt the product for their needs. And that probably wasn't the best decision, and so it's hard to resist that. I think everyone here understands it's very hard to resist that. But I think the more discipline you have on your ICP and maybe not even take those meetings, you don't even allow your sales team to go on those calls. I think that's going to make for a better journey.
I mean, I remember distinctly going at one point in BetterCloud, I went to one of the big banks and I went to pitch them. They invited me. They said they're very excited. I went there. I walked in the room. There's 30 of them in the room, just me pitching. And everyone's asking me different questions, security questions and this and all. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, this is amazing. We'd probably pay $20 million for this." I said, "Oh my God, this is going to be the best deal ever." And then I'm asking them a couple more questions. And basically they said, "Well, it's going to take about 18 months to go through our security process. And then after that, it'll probably take about a year to go through procurement. And then after that, usually takes about a year to deploy. So we're looking at like 3 years, 3.5." And I was like, and to your point, but of course, I like what you just said, which is maybe don't even take the meeting. Because of course, what happened is I took that information, went back to my team. I said, if we did these 3 things,
Right.
we could get all the banks. We could get every, and I start to process in my head how this is going to be the way we're going to win is go to the largest companies in the world. So I like that I'm really happy you just said that because I think you're already getting to scale. But I talk to companies that are 500,000 of ARR, a million, and they're telling me that they're going after the enterprise. These big people are so excited about their products. I said, you'll be out of business before you close that deal.
To me, it's the sales cycle. It's several things. It's the probability of closing. it's the length of closing. So both the sales cycle, the win rate, and and the length of the sales cycle. But I think there's another more important thing that hurts you if you focus on large enterprise early in your journey. The cycle of learning, right? Like these companies are going to give you a
Mm,
lot of feedback, but you don't really learn until they start using the product. They start so like as they're evaluating and telling you all the things that theoretically could or should be in the product and how they're going to operate it, uh, you don't really know. So you want your customers to act fast, both in purchasing the product, but also using the product and giving you feedback. And so I think focusing on mid-market customers that move faster, have more agility, it also improves your the clock speed of the company and how quickly you
mm,
learn. And I think that's even more important because you could be the best funded company. You could be one of these AI companies that just raised, a 100 billion, or whatever amounts companies are raising these days. And so it's not a question about runway or proving the data points to get to your next fundraise. I think it's just like, how do you accelerate the learning of the organization? And I think you learn so much faster with these mid-market companies because they're going to be more transparent with you. They're going to give you feedback faster. They're going to use the product and put it into production faster. Like all of that stuff accelerates when you're working with mid-market companies early in your journey.
and like you said right in the beginning of that statement, going up market is a much easier thing than going down market. Building your product up, your enterprise sales motion, all of that to go up market is much easier than trying to strip stuff off of your go to market motion and your product and everything to go. I don't know of many people, if any, that start at the largest enterprise and somehow go down market, but you can always go up.
That's been my experience. All of the great companies that you mentioned that I've been fortunate to be part of, we always started mid-market and worked our way up. And that journey was much easier because I agree. When you design or build a product for the mega enterprises, it's very hard to adapt that product, that offering for the SMB or mid-market. It's probably like a whole different product, frankly. But I think going on market scaling, especially with the way that most products are built today, but most products are built with, web scale uh, technologies and design principles. And so like scaling is really a function of how good your data model is and how good, you're using the modern tech stack. And so I think scaling the product is really more straightforward. I think sometimes scaling the UX, how the user experience of the product is, like the console and what you're showing there and how you manage your policies, et cetera, that can be a little trickier as you go from mid-market to large enterprise. We're having some of that in our journey right now. But I think scaling the back end, the database, all that stuff, that's much more straightforward. So I
Mm,
absolutely agree. Moving up is much easier.
mm. You have raised a good amount of money since you joined Cyberhaven, and knowing you pretty well, I would say you're a pretty deliberate person, and you're really thoughtful about how you approach everything. But when you think about fundraising specifically, how did you decide which investors to work with? What attributes were you looking for in those people
Yeah,
or firms?
I think first of all, I think it's always the people over the firms. I think the partners at the firms, the people you're going to be working with day to day, that matters so much more than the brand of the firm. The brand does matter too. I would say it's like probably 20% the brand of the firm and the resources that the firm brings, percent the individual you're going to be working with. Um, what I was looking for, I think a couple important things. Number one is shared ambition. Like I really was looking for investors that believe we could go build the breakout data security company. In cyber, as you know, David, most companies get acquired. Very few break out, become independent public companies. Um, and so a lot of cyber investors see the same thing. When they see a good offer, an attractive acquisition offer, they're inclined to take it. And I wanted to make sure that my investors were committed to building for the long run and building the breakout data security company, which is what I wanted. I was not here to just build it up to a certain scale and then try to go sell the company. So I was really looking for shared ambition, a big outcome. And that was one very important thing. Second thing I was looking for is someone that really understood the market dynamics. So people that have invested in cyber, they understand what's happening in the market. They understand the trends. They understand what the big incumbents are doing, so that it can help inform our strategy as a board. And then the third thing I was looking for are investors are looking to help. A lot of investors uh, want to manage the CEO and the company. They almost, they just want to govern. Other investors, they really want to roll up their sleeves and help. And you can tell the difference through the back channels. You do the back channels on investors, and you get a sense of who's really there to help and who's there to govern. And I was looking for more people that wanted to roll up their sleeves and build with us.
When we talk about helping, so I couldn't agree more with that last statement. When you talk about helping, in your case, what specifically do you look to the investors to help with, or what have they helped with so far?
I think they're more subtle things, a lot of times. I'll give you one recent example. So our industry is going through a lot of change right now. It's just this week there have been 3 or 4 acquisitions announced in my market, um, and some by mutual friends, folks that used to work for you. And so there's just a lot of action and activity in the market. So I think one of the things that I look for guidance from my board on is just, am I approaching the company strategy and all that goes with it, including funding and how we go about that, how we think about our ability to extend our platform through both organic and inorganic means, how I'm approaching the market, how well positioned we are. So the help that I'm getting from them right now is just calibrating on, is our strategy to scale and build this company from where we are today to, the breakout company that I want us to be. Are we on the right path? And do we need to adjust our strategy and do things differently? So I've been getting a lot of strategic input from the board recently on this topic. Other times it's simply like back channeling on candidates. I've used the board a lot to back channel on candidates. Sometimes they don't know the candidates, but they certainly are well connected to other people that do. And so they've helped me get to folks that can really give me very helpful back channel. So it's at all altitudes, everything from strategy to just back channeling people.
Mm.
I think I like board members who, when you go to them with an ask, they follow through quickly and thoroughly. There are other, as I'm sure you've experienced, sometimes you'll go to a board and you'll ask for help and you don't get anything back. It's crickets, So I'm looking for folks that, like follow through on when you ask them for help. And I've been fortunate. Most of our board here has been extremely helpful in our journey.
I will say the back channel references. I think that investors, especially the well connected ones, are that may be one of the things that's like most invaluable about having a well connected investor is they can find out our industry is relatively small. It's not small, but relatively small, and being able to call someone and then being able to get you a real reference. I mean, it saved me twice for sure by having that I would not have otherwise gotten to that
Yeah.
that back channel reference. So that's a good tactical one that I'm not sure everyone leverages their investors to do that.
And sometimes you want to use them almost as a way to obfuscate your interest in a candidate, right? Because you don't want the person you're back channeling with to know that this person is loose or that you're trying to hire this person, because it might be with the former manager or leader of that individual who has started a new company or is working in another company, and they would love to have that person too. They just didn't know that that candidate was loose. And so it's a way to obfuscate a little bit to get a data point from someone that person has worked with in the past without revealing something you don't want to reveal.
Yeah,
So
I actually never thought about that before.
yeah,
That's a good that's a good point. One CEO told me that they to get their investors to help because most of their investors were doing nothing, they created a scoreboard that they put as the first slide of every board deck, and it basically had every investor's name and a scoreboard of how many intros they made to customers, how many it was like all the different things. And he said, he's like, they hold me to numbers. Why can't I hold them to numbers?
yeah, I love the wall of shame. I love the wall of shame, but I think If if an entrepreneur out there is counting on their investors to make all these intros, I think it's hard. They don't want to be in the position of overly promoting their companies. A lot of these venture firms, they do have these programs where they have either like a security council or a CIO council, and so they can make intros for sure. I use my board more for late stage than early stage. Like I don't use them for business development. Like, hey, go make intros to all the people that you know in the market. I use them more like when we get late stage in a deal and we're having problems accessing the buyer in power, for example, or someone senior in the organization that we haven't been able to get to through our sales meet or sales team. I use the board to say, hey, can you help with an intro here? Can you help get us to this person? And that's been helpful. It doesn't always work out, but I use my board more in that manner, later stage than earlier in the funnel.
When you think about the team, so one of the things you mentioned is you had to replace a number of the team members and you've grown the team significantly. What is the number one attribute you look for in someone that you're hiring?
I don't know if you've heard this on the show before, but I look for self-awareness. And the reason I look for self-awareness is because I'm so keyed on growth. I'm constantly learning and growing. And I think if I didn't have good self-awareness, it would be hard for me to take feedback. It'd be hard for me to really understand what my strengths are and where I need to improve. I'd be more defensive when I, get feedback that may be different than what I'm expecting or something like that. So I think the folks that are really self-aware and also the self-awareness typically comes with a good deal of vulnerability. People that are willing to really like let their guard down and project some vulnerability, which I think is really inspiring to a lot of people. Leaders that are vulnerable, I think people gravitate towards them. And so I'm really over indexed on self awareness and vulnerability because I think those are the keys to unlock growth, growth in the individual and then growing with the company. And I think I'm constantly over indexed. Another one is something that I'm sure everyone here is looking for. It's hard to evaluate. It's hunger. I think people that are hungry and self-aware, those are my favorite people because those people are going to get shit done. They're going to be, they're going to stand the best chance of growing with the organization. Because as you know, the biggest reason why execs don't work out is that they were good for a certain phase of the company, but then the company outgrows them. The people who are self-aware and demonstrating that vulnerability, I think they have the best chance of growing and scaling with the company because they're growing and scaling themselves at a pretty high rate as well. But the hunger is what's key to all of that because the hunger and commitment has to be there, and you always look for that. You always want that. I think everyone on the show wants that. It's very, very hard to evaluate that when someone.
You're basically saying that they have on one hand kind of no ego, the self-awareness and the vulnerability or low ego, and on the other hand, super hungry
Mhm.
and really driven, which is a very that's a really it's a special combo when you find it, but that is a that's a hard combo. I would say that probably because I think it's like a mirror of you. Knowing you are both of those things, and it's probably it's a mirror of you. But that's especially in tech. I think that's hard to find,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
it is. It does sound like a mirror of me for sure. I didn't intend it that way. I think, David, what I was trying to reflect back on all the hiring decisions I've made and all the people that I thought really, really did well and all the people that, grew and continue to do amazing things after I worked with them. These are the common threads. These are the threads of what I felt enabled the root cause of success for a lot of these folks that I have worked with in the past. So it does sound like a mirror of me, but it's more just trying to understand what did what kind of individuals have I seen be successful, both in the time that I worked with them and throughout their careers, and I kind of trace it back to these things. Uh, Everybody wants hardworking employees, of course. Of course, everything I said has some balance to it. Like you don't want people that are constantly grinding and they're unpleasant to be around because they're so stressed out with their goals and, whatever, what have you. So you want balance, but that's again where the self-awareness comes in. Like those two things really go hand in hand. I think like really hard charging people who are not self-aware, they can, be a bull in China shop and really like alienate a lot of colleagues. But if they had great self-awareness and they're like, oh yeah, I'm kind of coming across a little too aggressive in these situations, like they can meter themselves too. They can kind of throttle their ambition and their drive in certain contexts. So I really think those things go hand in hand. But like I said, I think for me, it's always about how do I get better at evaluating that during the interview process. And of course, you do back channels and everything like we talked about. For me, the key to trying to really evaluate someone's hunger is to just understand their childhood. I read this great quote. I think it came from Mike Morris at Sequoia. I might be misattributing it, but he said something. It was an investor that said something like, "Everything that happens to someone and endures throughout their lifetime happened before they were 14." So basically, it's like your childhood that really shapes who you are. And I really believe in that. I really subscribe to that theory. Sometimes when you start asking about that, you really kind of unpack a bunch of stuff. And so it's a good way to evaluate both aspects, like, are they willing to really be vulnerable and open up and talk about hardship or things that happened to them that maybe weren't that pleasant in their childhood and how that's shaped them and then how that's fueled them. Like I get so much of what I'm looking for by just asking about people's upbringing in childhood. Like, what was your
Yeah.
childhood like? What was hard about your childhood? How did, where did you get support? What were the, what was it like to grow up in a family of five, and be the fifth child, like stuff like that. I really try to get into what made that person who they are. And I feel like you get the most, insight by asking about someone's upbringing.
Hmm. I it's one of the things that I do on this show is I ask people about their background, and I think there's definitely commonality across the 20 something people that I've interviewed, that there's something in their childhood. It's interesting because it's in some cases it's something really bad,
Hmm.
and in some cases it could be something really like some amazing exposure that they got, but to your point, it's something for most people, they can actually, in some of the conversations I've had, people didn't even realize it was something in their childhood
Right.
till I asked
Right.
the question. Then I said, "Wait a minute, you told me 60 minutes ago this, and you just told me this is what you learned from your grandfather."
Right.
They're like, "Whoa, you're right. You're right. I never actually put those two and two together." But um, so do you spend a lot? How much time in the interview? I mean, how long do you go into that? Is that half the interview? Talking about the background and the childhood and all of that?
Typically, I'm not doing that in the first interview. Like, when I'm hiring an exec, I'm sure like you're spending, many hours probably, for me, an average, uh, duration of time I spend with an executive before I make an offer is probably like somewhere between 10 to 20 hours. So it's a good amount of time. So I'm not doing that in the first interview. I think in the first interview, it's a little bit of like selling the company and the vision and what we're up to, helping that exec understand or that candidate understand the situation that they could be walking into, and then just learning about their career. Like, okay, tell me about these career decisions. Like, why did you go here? What prompted this move? Why do you have these short stints here? Like, just really understand their career arc and all the decisions that kind of led them to where they are. That's typically like the first interview. So this behavioral stuff, this stuff about childhood and everything else that shapes how they operate, I usually get into that in the second interview. And honestly, David, I spend usually my interviews are an hour. Sometimes they run a little longer. I spend the whole hour almost on that, really digging deep. And then, I'll tell you, a lot of times, like you just said, there's a lot of trauma and pain that gets unlocked when you start probing on this. Sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable, but in most cases, I think 99% of the cases, it almost feels like the candidate, when they're talking about stuff that they haven't talked about in a long time, it's almost like cathartic for, like, they're really like letting go of stuff, and they're able to kind of relate it to like what they're doing today, to back to something that happened maybe like 20 years ago. And it is hard to talk about sometimes, but it really helps me understand that person. And also starts to build a bond between the candidate and myself. So I really understand who they are as a person, and I can be the best leader for them. So it has so many positive benefits. I've gotten it's wild how often people say to me, "Gosh, this is such a different type of interview. Like no one's ever asked me these questions before." I hear that in at least half of my interviews when I'm probing on this stuff. Maybe more, maybe like 60, 70% of my interviews, people are saying like, "I've never talked with anyone like this before in an interview." And so there is a little bit of discomfort on my side. Like, oh, am I getting too personal? Am I probing too deep? But it's worked for me.
When I got my most senior exec team, and then I was putting the team together, and it was forming, storming, all that stuff. We did this offsite, and we had this person come in, and they moderated this exercise where everyone got a piece of paper, and it was essentially you had to draw their curve of their personal
Mhm,
life and their career. And it was the peaks, the valleys, and all
mhm,
the key moments in their personal life and their career, and then had to share with everyone. Once we started drawing on this thing, it was each person, they got another piece of paper, they had to redo it, they started trying to figure out the exact levels. They It took us 30, 45 minutes each to map this, and then share it was 25, 30 minutes each. But it's exactly what you were talking about, where these were the people we were already working with. They were already on the team. But when we started sharing our childhood or the early part of our career or all these things that shaped us and what made us happy, what were the downs,
mhm.
people started crying. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my, from a leadership perspective. We all walked out understanding each other at a completely different level, and each other's motivation and why were we even doing what we do. And I never actually did. I mean, I would ask the questions in interviews, but not to the level of depth you're talking about. And what you're saying, this exercise that I've been through, y the conversations I've had on this podcast, like, it's worth
Yeah,
spending the time there because
yeah,
it is so telling to someone, even
right.
to just their
Yeah.
motivation, what
That's,
drives them.
the root of what I'm trying to get to is that, like, what drives someone, what motivates them, what drives them, what's the underlying source of their motivation. But I'm also trying to get a sense of like the shadow. Everyone has a shadow. I've got one, you've got one. We all have like a dark side. That's a little bit of a negative way to put it, but we all have this shadow where we're not at our best. And there are times and circumstances that bring out that behavior. And I'm trying to understand when that's going to happen and what might trigger that. And that also helps me to make sure that we surround that person with the right support and we don't put that individual in those kinds of situations. And I can also
Mhm.
like recognize pattern match that faster and to jump in to make sure that, that it doesn't unravel and get worse. Cause as you know, a lot of times this stuff is happening, but you're just not seeing it in the moment or in the right manner. And you're not able to do anything about it until it's too late. Right. Like there's already a lot of
Mhm.
fracture in the relationship, maybe not with you, maybe with a different exec, on the team. And by the time that happens, it's pretty hard to repair that. Like in therapy sessions that I've done, my therapist will talk about rupture and repair in relationships. I think that works well with your spouse, maybe, but sometimes repair is very hard between like adults who are in exec functions and they've got their fears, they've got their, personality, they've got this, perception that they want to manage. Um, it can be really hard. So I also feel like it's one of the things that's enabled me to identify friction and tension in other relationships on my team and be able to jump in and help diffuse some of that
Mhm.
earlier.
Mhm. 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 Um, what has been the biggest challenge since you've been at Cyberhaven? What's the biggest challenge you've ever faced, and how have you overcome
I
that?
wish there was just one big challenge. This company, I think, has been pretty resilient. We faced a lot of challenges. And I think the theme has been, hardship with people. And I'll tell you what's happened. So in my first quarter in the company, we had one of our founding engineers pass away very tragically, and it really hit the team hard. He was obviously very close with a lot of the team. He was an important contributor of our product, and just gone very suddenly, very tragically. And we had to move forward. Then in my second year in the company, we had our top sales rep at the time have a brain aneurysm during a Zoom call with the customer. Like literally on the call, he started not feeling well and went off camera. And then later on, we learned that he had to be airlifted because he was in a remote part of the country during this meeting. He had to be airlifted to another state where they had the facilities, and they did brain surgery on him like that day. And so we had to figure out lots of things like how do we bring him back? When do we bring him back? How do we care for his health and everything? Um, then all of that happened. Then you've heard the term wartime CEO. I became a real wartime CEO when Russia invaded Ukraine. When that happened, most of our development was in Ukraine. And we had all kinds of difficult decisions about how much do we financially support them? How do we provide for them? How do we help get them out of the country if they're looking to get out of the country and relocate them? How do we ensure business continuity for us? If these folks are not able to work or they're cut off from telecommunications, how do we ensure that our business survives? There are a lot of hard things about that. And I would say it's just like it's continued. We've continued to have like moments of hardship like that with our employees. I think that's been the hardest thing is like figuring out how to care for the people while still running a business. And sometimes those things come at odds.
Mm.
Like I mentioned, the Ukraine situation, at that time we were not flush with capital. We had, I don't remember exactly the amount of money. We had maybe like $10 million in the bank or something, maybe a little more. I can't remember the exact number, but it wasn't like we had hundreds of millions of dollars and we could just like aid our Ukraine team, even if they weren't working, and we could give them some extra cash to have in their pockets as they were trying to scramble to relocate and things like that. We did everything we can, but those have been some of the hardest decisions. It's just balancing the needs of taking care of our people with the business.
I feel like when those types of things happen, it really puts everything in context, of because when you talk about those types of things, that happen to your team, I've been through similar situations with individuals on the team dying. I've been through a variety of those, and it really does put everything, kind of in context. The business stuff seems easy actually at that point compared to the people stuff, and it's I know some CEOs who are cold, let's say, and when that stuff happens, you know, they only
Mhm.
prioritize the business, and I know the ones that are the opposite, who only prioritize the people, and it's like you said, it's this balance of the business has to continue running to support
Yeah.
those people and the people who are on the team, but also these are people's lives and families, and so I that seems like a lot to happen to you in 4 years though, that like I would say that
It is a lot, especially when you consider, at the time that the first two events happened, we were a small company. We're a company of like, 30 people, 20, 40 people, maybe. For those things to happen to a company that's at that scale, it's like, you're like, wow, are we cursed? It's no way or something. Uh,
yeah.
Fortunately, history has shown that we've done well. We're not cursed, but you wonder, it's like, wow, why is this happening when, we're a small handful of people? It's, like the probability of those events happening so close together is pretty low, right? So you, I think, like you just said, David, for me, the hardest part of this job has always been the people side. And it's not just the kind of stuff I'm talking about here. It's also people who aren't scaling with the business like we talked about, and you need to upgrade them or replace them. People who are maybe sometimes so committed to the business that they're, hurting their personal lives, and there's a huge cost on the
Mm.
personal life, and helping to kind of put that person in a bit more balance. Sometimes it's people who have too much ego and narcissism, and they're so blind to like feedback that other people are giving them, and they're really holding the organization back because of that, because they're blind to the feedback and they're not self-aware enough. All of this stuff, David, for me is the hardest stuff to deal with. To me, the business decisions
Mm.
are much more straightforward. If you're, obviously you have to be analytical, you have to be thoughtful, you have to, have some good experience, and maybe some people would call that wisdom. But for me, that's always come easy to me. And I feel like most of the decisions I've made on the business and product have worked out, but I've made a lot of people mistakes over the years, and I continue to learn from them. But those are the hardest decisions.
Where is Cyberhaven in 3 years from today?
Well, I hope we are the breakout data security company serving all large enterprises and all segments in the market. We're protecting the world's top innovators. We already protect a lot of the world's top innovators today, but I would like to see us become the default choice for enterprises when they have to secure their data. And I think in the future, in the next 3 years, we're going to see data security become the core of cybersecurity. I always like to say data security is the final frontier in cyber. We've done a lot of work to secure our devices, our networks, our clouds. A lot of those products are commoditized. I think what you get from one vendor versus another is pretty much the same. I think all the action and innovation is going to happen in the asset class that matters the most for businesses, especially in the era of AI. It is the data. That's really what differentiates a business from another. And I think data security is going to be the most important aspect of cyber programs. And in 3 years, I hope that Cyberhaven is the leading default choice for enterprises when they think about their data security needs.
Amazing. So I want to transition to you a little bit, like you do in your interviews. So you've been CMO, you've been product marketing. I worked with you, and I meant what I said in the intro. Like, just every time we would talk, I'm like, my mind was blown, and just the way you think about positioning and messaging and all of that. Um, how did you go from that? You could have been CMO of any company, and how did you go from that to being CEO? Did you always know you wanted to be CEO? Was it someone offered you this job at Cyberhaven and you jumped right on it? Like, what can you talk me through that transition?
My approach at childhood, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My parents were immigrants and they didn't find that opportunity working for other people in low wage jobs was the best way to create for our family, create and elevate our family. So they started a small business. They started a restaurant business near UC Berkeley, where they ran that business for a dozen years, 15 years. Very, very hard to run a small restaurant business because you're there every day almost. I think they work 364 days a week. I think they might have taken one day off a year. They were there all the time, and so I had a lot of influence just seeing how hard they worked and what entrepreneurialism meant and what it meant to be committed to your business. So from there, I started like a bunch of small businesses. College, I was like selling collectibles, like baseball cards, trading cards. I was a DJ. I had a little small DJ thing going on in college. That was a lot of fun. So I always had this kind of entrepreneurial bent. So that started in childhood. But then as I went through my career, I did a bunch of different things, like you said, product management. I started my career in finance. I was actually an investment banker coming out of undergrad. So I had exposure to lots of aspects of the business, everything from finance to product to go to market. And I think it was obvious to me when I was sitting in the exec room at offsites, et cetera, like I just had thoughts and ideas on every topic. And sometimes, I was like the annoying exec that had, questions, feedback on everything, on everyone else's stuff. And I just knew I had a lot more to contribute, and especially on people and culture. Like I played a big role at Nutanix when I was the CMO there, just on all the culture stuff. Like, what should we do to recognize, the families and spouses of our employees at holiday parties? Like show them some appreciation for the sacrifice. Like I would come up with ideas for that. I would come up with ideas for how do we come up with a way to celebrate and reinforce our values. So I always had a lot of ideas on all the functional stuff, or the strategy and the culture stuff. So when you think about what a CEO really does, I think that's what you do, right? Those are the top three things: drive and influence the product strategy, uh, create and tell the story or narrative of the company, and then hire the right people and shape the culture, right? So I just knew I was well positioned to be successful. And then we roll into how I got to Cyberhaven. I was offered a number of different CEO jobs in my past, fortunately, because of my success. And I turned them down. They just weren't the right, maybe it wasn't the right timing. And, I was probably a little comfortable just doing the CMO thing. I had done that at several companies. I've been a public company CMO, helped take companies public. So I was very comfortable with that. And I was starting, my family was expanding. I have 5-year-old twins now and a 7-year-old. So I had one daughter at the time, one child, and we were about to have twins. And I was just like in a comfort zone. So when Cyberhaven first reached out to me, I actually turned the job down because I was in this mode of I'm comfortable. My family's expanding. I can't take on uh, the intensity and the demands of a CEO job. But then COVID happened. So I kind of, I basically like disengaged from Cyberhaven in early 2020. I think it was January, February. And then COVID happens. We all, go home, shut down. We're looking at our families, spending a lot of time with our families. Um, the first day that we went into lockdown here in the Bay Area was the first birthday of my twins. And so I was looking at my kids thinking, gosh, they're going to grow up so fast. And if there was ever a time for me to take the leap and go be CEO, why not now? Because, people were dying all over the world, all around us. And at that time, you didn't know what to expect in the future, right? Like the future was so uncertain in 2020, early 2020. Um, I, so then I re-engaged, they came back in like May or something like that. And I thought like this is the right time for me. If I want to do this, I feel like I can do this job well. And for my own family planning and needs, I want to make sure that I have a lot of time with my kids as they grow older. And I didn't want to be grinding in a startup, when my kids needed me most, which I think it's going to be their teenage years. And so I thought, why not? Why not
Hmm.
now? Why not this company? And of course, I loved the the problem set that we're attacking. Data ultimately is what fuels innovation, and I think of Cyberhaven as protecting the innovation economy. So it's a mission that means a lot to me and a lot to my family with young kids. I want them to grow up in a better world, and and I just had such tremendous alignment with the founders on values and ambition for the company. So it all came down to those things, the market, the alignment with the founders, but the final 20% that really kind of tipped me over and got me to take this leap was the timing and what was happening in the world and in my life at the time.
Hmm. When when your parents had the restaurant, did you work there growing up? Did you spend a lot of time
I
there?
spent all summers there, a lot of weekends. I I was probably like 12, when I started working there. And of course, like at 12, you're limited in what you can do, but I thought pretty good. My math skills got pretty good. Working in the restaurant, I was running the cashier a lot, but I just started, bussing the tables and, taking orders. Of course, I helped out and I was there every summer and every weekend. Um, it ingrained a lot of the kind of core values and principles in me about, hard work, dedication, just learning, constantly learning and getting better. I learned all that from my parents and, very personal story. We're recording today, the day after my father's birthday. My father passed away late last year. Both my parents have passed away now, so it was a good moment yesterday to think about them and their influence on me. Um, and
Mm.
I did a lot of reflection yesterday.
Do you expose your kids, or at least let's say the 7-year-old, to what you do?
Absolutely, I try to really merge these two worlds. People talk about work life balance. I think of it as more like integration. Um, I I always brought I always try to bring my kids and expose them to what I do and what explain to them also afterward what just happened. Because a lot of us, we're shuttling our kids around, trying to be active and participate in their lives. So a lot of times I have to take calls in the car and they're with me and, they're, if they can be well behaved, I can actually call, um, after I hang up, I'll explain to them what just happened. It's like, hey, what was going on there. First, I'd say, like, do you remember that guy? Do you remember, Mr. Ricky, who's the one of the people I talk to the most? He's our COO, head of RevOps. And first they'll recognize the voice and they'll like, yeah, I remember him. And then I'll say, do you know what was just happening there? And so, yeah, I try to care a little bit so that they can understand. They're pretty young, 7 and 5. They just go back to their, reading or whatever they're doing. But maybe they're picking up just a little bit of the experience.
They definitely pick it up. I believe I did the same thing with my kids, and you're having those calls, and and then they'll say something to me, like out of the blue, and the only way they could know that is because of the 5 years of conversations that they've been hearing since they were my younger one who's 8 said to me the other day, I was telling him about a new company I'm working with, and he literally said, "So how much equity are they giving you?" He's 8 years old, and and he said, "You think it's gonna be worth something, or you think they're," and he's having this whole conversation. He's been in the car with me negotiating fundraisers and talking to, for all these years, and I believe wholeheartedly, back to this conversation we've had now so many times, this comment of like childhood, and I think through osmosis, you at 5 years old, you feel it and see it, and and we can debate, and people have different opinions of work life balance. I also agree work life integration. I don't think there is balance when you're in this type of a role, but when you see your parents have no balance, you compared to your
Yeah.
parents, you have a lot of balance compared to what they were doing, compared to what my dad was doing, a lot of balance compared to that type of work. And so, but I think it's good for kids to see that. So anyway, I love that. What you have been very successful in your career, and you do have this drive. What is it that drives you? Like, what is the deep down motivation that that makes you get up every day, get on the plane when you have to get on the plane, do the like, what is
No,
it that
it's
drives you?
changed, Dave. It's changed over the years. There was a core drive, I think, early in my career, just about like getting to a state of financial independence and well being. It's like just having enough wealth and money to do the things that I wanted to, buy a good house and live a good life. I think that was driving me because I saw my parents how much of a struggle it was for them, and how hard things were for us growing up. So I think that was the first level of motivation. That's very strong motivation, for someone that grows up with humble beginnings. They want to get to a better place for themselves and their families, their children. Um, it was started with that. Then I think after I achieved that, it morphed into something else. It morphed into, how do I have a bigger impact? Like when you're just worried about financial well-being, you're really like worried just about yourself and your family. Then I started thinking about, okay, what's the next set of people that I can impact? What's my community, and people that are um, part of my family tree that have maybe worked for me and have gone on in their careers and done some awesome things. I started thinking more about how can I have greater impact on those people, like people aren't in my family, but are closely in my community, in my personal community, the people that I've grown up with, the people that I've mentored, etc. And now I've taken it now to like, okay, and I feel like I've really achieved that. The job's not finished in either of these missions, but I feel like I've really achieved great impact on my community. Now I'm thinking about how do I have impact on the world, and this is where the mission of the company is so critical. I really think we're protecting the world's top innovators. We're deployed in Mag 7 companies and some of the top AI labs and folks that are developing the next generation of vaccines and with mRNA technology and stuff like that. These are all the things that are making our world a better place. And so I really am motivated now to make sure that we do the best job protecting their data and their intellectual property so that they can continue to invest in their research and development and develop things that this world needs. And that's the mission now. That's what's driving me now, is like just having more and more impact. And look, I'm almost 50. I turned 49 a couple weeks ago, and when you get to that age, I know you're a little younger, but when you get to my age, well, first of all, you start feeling it in your body. That's for sure. But the second thing is you start really thinking about what's the purpose? Like, what am I trying to do here with the rest of my life and my career? and I've thought a lot about that. And this is what I've come with is I want to just have greater impact on the world. And, I think I can have that impact through building a great data security company that protects innovation in our world.
Last question. Knowing everything you know today and the entire journey you've been on, what is one piece of advice you would have given yourself before you started your first job out of school?
The thing I wish I knew then that I know now is, there's a certain pacing, I think, to a career. Uh, it's like, uh, I used to be a DJ, as I mentioned earlier, and, DJs don't just run the big hits and the high intensity music, like for the 60-minute set that they run, right? They go up and down and up and down. And I think there's that kind of like that same rhythm to a career. When I started my career, it was just like everything fast all the time, like high intensity, just keep taking the most challenging job. And I think I would probably tell my younger self, like, there are times to slow down in a career and there are times to really step on the gas and go intense. And I think it's about finding that rhythm in your career that really can, uh, make it a much more enjoyable journey. Because for me, when I was just like high intensity, always on, it probably made it less enjoyable for me. I think there are times when I wish I just kind of slowed down and just enjoyed the success more. Like, for example, I was part of a great company, Palo Alto Networks, and I left because I thought, I got to go do the next big challenging thing. I probably should have just chilled out and enjoyed that journey for a couple more years. Same thing with some of the other companies, but I'm always like getting restless and wanting to challenge myself and keep the pace and intensity of my growth and development high. But I wish I could have moderated that at times and just like allowed myself to slow down and enjoy it a little more.
Howard, I really, really appreciate you doing this with me, and I appreciate all the help you've given me over the years and inspiration. And I hope, I hope people listening can take that from this conversation because there was a lot of really good insights and unique insights that I haven't heard yet on this podcast. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, David. It's been great to have you in my life and have you part of my community. And I'm glad that I've been helpful to you. You've been awesome for me as well. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Everyone, hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something. If you did, please share with your networks, like, subscribe, and we'll see you for the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.